So we're ready to tackle a multi-step example. So you'll see on your screen that off to the left-hand side, I have the steps to simplifying a multi-step problem so that we can follow those steps. And I have our first multi-step example. So we are going to work through this example by following our 5 steps over to the side. So make sure that as you're following along, you are writing these steps down. Even when it seems like a lot, write them all down so you have good examples to look at later. And remember to pause anytime you need to really make sure you can understand. So let's start with step number 1. It says, change radicals into powers. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to look at my problem and I'm going to see if I have any radicals. Well, remember, a radical looks like this. Well, I don't see that symbol anywhere in here. So what that means is a really good thing. That means I am done with step number 1. I didn't even have to do it. And now I'm ready to tackle step number 2. It says eliminate parentheses. So I'm coming over to my problem and I'm seeing if I have any parentheses. Well, I do. They are right over here. So I'm going to eliminate my parentheses. Now how I do that is, remember, I have to take the exponent that's on the outside of the parentheses. This time that's a -2, and I'm going to distribute it, which means I have to put it on the 2, on the x, and on the y. Okay, so I'm taking -2 and putting it on the 2. I already had x to the -7, and I'm going to put the -2 on that. And I already had y to the power 8, and I'm going to put the -2 on that. Well, you'll notice, I didn't really get rid of my parentheses yet, so I have to do some more simplifying. Okay, first I'm going to look at these numbers here. Okay, 2 to the -2nd power. Not very helpful if I type that in my calculator because it gives me a decimal. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave it like that for a moment. When I look here, though, what I see is a power to a power rule. And remember, when this happens, I multiply. Well, -7 times -2 would be a +14. And then here, again, I see this power to a power rule. And again, I need to multiply. So 8 times -2 is -16. So I've now eliminated my parentheses. Now before I say that I'm done with step 2, I'm going to rewrite my problem to help me stay organized. So this front part of my problem I didn't change at all, so I'm just going to bring that straight down. I still have this multiplication symbol. And now I'm going to take this simplified, after I got rid of all those parentheses, and bring that part down. And now I'm ready to say that I'm done with step number 2. And I'm going to move on to step number 3, which says move any negative exponents. So before I actually worry about moving them, I'm going to go through and find them. Well, I have a negative exponent here, and here, and here. Well, to move these, I'm going to have to move them to the bottom of a fraction. Well, right now I don't even have a fraction bar, but the cool thing is I can create one. So I'm drawing myself a big long fraction bar. And I'm going to go through each piece of the problem that I had and see if I need to move it or not. This 4. Don't need to move it, so it's going to be on the top of my fraction. X to the 6th. It's positive exponent, so it stays where it is. But look, here was one of my negative exponents, so I'm moving that to the bottom and making it positive. This has a negative exponent, move it to the bottom and make it positive. X to the 14th, that already was positive, so I'm putting that on the top. Y to the -16, that was negative, so I'm moving it to the bottom to make it positive. Now one thing you might be wondering is, why did I take this 2 to the -2nd power, and when I wrote it down here, why did I put it in the front? Now the only reason I did that is because normally when our base is a number, such as 2 instead of a variable, I always put that in the front of my problem. So that's all I was doing there, was reorganizing it so that my whole numbers were in the front of my problem, in front of my variables. So now that I've moved my negative exponents, I'm done with step number 3. And I'm ready to do step number 4, which says to simplify my coefficients. Now if you remember, coefficients are the numbers that are in front of our variables. So I'm going to simplify these. Well, first I need to look at the bottom of my fraction here. I have 2 to the power 2. Well, I can simplify that using my calculator. And I find that 2 to the power 2 is actually 4. So I'm going to erase 2 to the power 2 here and replace it with the number 4. So now if I look at this fraction here with my coefficients, what I really see is 4 divided by 4. Well, luckily for me, 4 divided by 4 makes the number 1, and these things cancel out. So what I'm left over with is just all of my variables. I'm left with x to the 6th, x to the 14th, all divided by y to the 3rd, y to the 16th. And I'm done with step number 4. I've simplified my coefficients. And the last thing that I have to do is step number 5, which says use product and quotient rules. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for my like bases. So I see an x base here and an x base here. Now I have to ask myself, are these being multiplied or are they being divided? Well, because they're on the next to each other, they're both on the top of the fraction, I know that they're being multiplied. So I'm going to take those exponents and add them together. 6 plus 14 would be x to the power 20. Now I also have like bases on the bottom of my fraction. I have a y and a y. Again, because they're next to each other, that means they're being multiplied. So I take 3 plus 16 and I get y to the 19th power. And this is my final answer. Now I know it's my final answer because I only have one x variable and I only have one y variable. So that's my final simplified answer, and I am done with step 5.